Hey guys, this is Eric Vasquez here with a brand new tutorial for you today from designcuts.com. In this tutorial, we're going to be creating a realistic and authentic Parisian storefront called La Grande Patisserie using Illustrator and Photoshop. Now, to complete this tutorial, we're going to be using a couple of awesome fonts from the all-new Professional Dynamic Font Library. Now, this bundle features quality fonts from some of the world's greatest type foundries. For the purposes of today's tutorial, we will be using Evanston Ale House from Kimmy Design, along with a free stock photo from Pixabay and an awesome storefront mockup from the Design Cuts marketplace. Now, if you're all ready to get started, then fire up Adobe Illustrator and let's begin. Now, the first thing we want to do here is create a new document, and we want it to be 4 inches wide by 4 inches tall with one artboard, and then let's just go ahead and give our document a name. I'm going to call it La Grande Patisserie Elements, because first, before we actually go into customizing our mockup, what we're going to do is build out all of the elements that we're going to need. So this will essentially either be the branding or the signage that we use for the mockup. So the first thing you want to do here is make sure you have your character panel open, because we are going to be using that quite a bit. If you don't see that, you can access it by going to the window menu and choosing Type, Character. Alright, so the first thing we want to do here is press T to get our type tool. And I'm just going to click here and type out La Grande Patisserie, which just means the big pastry. Now, I can press Command-Control-A to select all, come over here to my character panel, and I want to change the font to Evanston Ale House. And for this, we're going to be using one of the styles called 1826 Black. Okay, so we just need to find 1826 Black here. There we go. And that's kind of a nice condensed looking font. Now for the size, let's go ahead and adjust it to make it about 32 points so we can make it nice and big. And I know it's going a little bit off of our canvas here, but we're going to adjust that. So normally if you wanted to lessen or make the space greater in between all of the letters, you could do that by adjusting the tracking over here. And you can see what kind of effect that has. As you go into the negative range, it gets more condensed. And as you go into the positive range, it gets more spread out. But the only problem with that is it's kind of universal and it makes all the spacing equal. And in some cases, you may find that you have a little bit more space between certain letters than others. For example, the space between the P and the A over here is a little bit different than the space between these two S's or the I and the S, just as one example. So you may want to do that manually. But before we do that, we're just going to come over here and customize this by changing this one letter. So come over to the first A here in La, and instead of making it uppercase, just go ahead and type a lowercase a. Now click and highlight it, and you should see this little pop-up down here, which gives you a few other alternatives. Now we're just going to select this first one that has the nice line underneath it, just to make that a little bit different. Now, to go back to customizing the amount of space in between the characters, all we need to do here is click our cursor in between two characters that we want to modify, and then we're going to hold the Alt-Option key and use the left arrow to decrease the amount of space. Now, if you wanted to add space, you would hold the Alt-Option key and tap the right arrow. Okay, but we're just going to go through each of these letters here and manually adjust these just a bit to lessen some of the space, because when we apply this to our mockup, we want it to be as big as possible. And by moving the letters a little bit closer together, it'll allow us to be able to make it larger on the sign. And if that doesn't make sense right now, don't worry, it'll make sense later. Okay, so I'm just quickly going in here and manually adjusting the spacing between each of the characters and each of the words. Now it fits nicely on our artboard. Okay, press T to get your type tool again. Click down here, and this time let's go ahead and change the font, or not change the font, but we're going to change the style to 1919 Black. Okay, so this one looks a little bit different. It's not as condensed, but it still has these nice serifs on it. It's a really nice, beautiful looking font. And these are just a few of the styles that you guys will get access to in the full bundle. Now for this text, we're going to type out Maison fondée in 1925, which essentially just means house founded in 1925. In order to make this a little bit more authentic, I decided to try and put everything in French. I was feeling a little bit inspired. Now come back over here to your character panel, and let's just go ahead and make the point size about 11.15. And now we can make a more universal tracking adjustment here. So we're going to come over here and let's just type in 255 so our letters are nice and spread out. Okay, and then we can just place that there. Now what we want to do from here is select our first line of text, click, hold the Alt, Option, and Shift keys, and drag down to make a copy. Now we're going to press T to get our type tool, remove the space between la and grande, press return to do a hard return, and then do the same thing between the second and third line. So you now have it on 3 separate lines. Now, click inside, press Command-Control-A to select everything, and instead of your character panel, you should have another tab here called Paragraph. And if you click that, all we want to do is make sure that we align center, so all of our text is nice and centered. Now for this, let's go ahead and make the point size 15, and we're also going to adjust the line spacing a bit by making it about 13.6, just to move everything a little bit closer together. Now what we're going to do is open up another freebie that we have here from Kimmy Design, and it's one of our ornaments that comes with the Evanston Alehouse font. Okay, now your folder structure may look a little bit different than mine, but you will have all of these files here. And all I've done is saved each of these EPS files that we're going to be using in different formats. So depending on which version of Adobe Illustrator you're using, you'll want to select the one that matches up with the version that you have. So for me, I'm going to use version CC and then open this up in Illustrator. Now I'm just going to select that, press Command-Control-C to copy it, and then Command-Control-W to close out of that window. Back over here in your main artboard, press Command-Control-V to paste it. Okay, now what we're going to do is maybe make this a little bit larger. Okay, and just move it down a bit so that it's centered. And if you want to center it exactly, you can click and drag around this entire group here, come up to the window menu, choose a line. Now all you have to do is select this second option here that says Horizontal Align Center. But it looks like we were right on the money. So what we want to do now is select our text, come up to the Type menu, and we're going to choose Create Outlines. Now all that's going to do is make it so our text is no longer editable. It's basically converted it into a series of points or a shape. Now select the text again, come up to the Object menu and choose Path, Offset Path, check off the Preview box, and now enter a value of 4px, 4 pixels. All right, and now you can see that it's basically expanded that shape. Now go ahead and hit Return, and what we need to do now is press Command-Control-X to cut it, and then Command-Control-F to paste it in the front. Come back up to the window menu, and this time choose the Pathfinder tool, and from here we want to select the Merge icon, which is the third one in on the bottom row, and that's going to merge that together into one single shape. Now press I to get your eyedropper tool and click anywhere over here on the white background. Now that's just going to fill our merged shape with white. But the problem is that it's now covering up our text and the sunburst in the background. And we only really want it to cover the sunburst. So all we need to do here is press Command-Control in the left bracket and then press Command-Control in the left bracket again until you see both of these. Now, in order to get our sunburst all the way to the back, you could use the same keyboard shortcut or just come up here to the Object menu and choose Arrange, Send to Back. Okay, so that's a little bit better. Now we can see the text. There's a little bit of white space around it, a little bit of padding, and that just makes it a little bit easier to read. But the problem is that now we have a few little tiny spots here where our sunburst is either getting chopped off or is just being covered up in kind of an ugly way. So to fix that, all we're going to do is press A to get the Direct Selection tool. And you can come in here and maybe move some of these points around. But what might actually be working better for us at this point is to manually cover up some of these shapes. So again, get your eyedropper tool, press I on the keyboard, select an area of white, press P to get your pen tool, and now just draw a couple of shapes here manually to cover up some of these rays that aren't looking very nice. Okay, and we're just going to come in here to cover up some of these little bits here that we don't really want. All right, nothing too crazy, but just to make it look a little bit cleaner and neater. All right, I'm going to cover that one. Cover this one. And let's also cover this piece right here. Okay, so just making those couple of small adjustments just makes it look a little bit more tidy and neat. And it's okay if some of them get chopped off, we just don't want any tiny points. All right, because that could look a little bit weird when it gets small. So at this point, what we can do is grab our regular selection tool, press V on the keyboard, click and drag around the entire lockup, come back over to your Pathfinder and choose the Merge icon once again. That's going to just merge all of this together. Now, if I were to draw a box behind this lockup here, I'm just going to make a square really quickly, send it to the back, and fill it with a color so you guys can see what's happening. Now, I don't want to see all of this white. I actually want that to be transparent. So what we're going to do is press A to get the white arrow or the direct selection tool, click on an area of white, and then come up to the select menu and choose Same, Fill, and Stroke. That's going to grab everything that is either filled or has an outline of white, and then we're just going to press Delete. Now, if I put that color back in, you can see that we have a single color lockup, which is exactly what we want. All right, and the nice thing is that now I can move this around as one shape and one unit. Now, I'm going to select my type tool again, click down here on the bottom, and what I'm going to do is type the same text that we typed before. Maison fondue in 1925. All right, and we want this to be on 3 lines like this, but we're going to change the type again. So instead of 1919 black, this time we're going to use 1893 black. And let's also go ahead and make the line spacing 11.28, and the type itself can be a little bit smaller. Let's make it 9.5. Okay, and then for the tracking or the kerning here, we'll just go ahead and set it to -25. Okay, and now we have 3 lines of centered text. Now let's go ahead and add a nice frame, a curved frame above and below this. I'm going to come back to the freebies folder for this tutorial. And this time I'm going to look for the frame file. So I'm going to grab frame CC, another beautiful ornament here from Kimmy Design. And once we open this up in Illustrator, I'm going to do the same thing. Command-Control-A to select all, Command-Control-C to copy it, and Command-Control-W to close out of that window. Now press Command-Control-V to paste it, move it down here above your text, click over any of the 4 corners of the bounding box and drag inwards while holding the Alt, Option, and Shift keys to scale it down from the center. And now we're going to hold the Alt, Option, and Shift keys, click and drag another copy down below. Now we want to flip this or reflect it. So to do that, let me just zoom in first. I'm going to select the bottom copy here, come up to Object, and choose Transform, Reflect. Now check off the preview box and choose Horizontal for the access, and you'll see that you now have a mirror image of your frame. Go ahead and click OK. Now we're just going to tap that down a few times to give it a little bit of space here. Maybe move the top one up 1 or 2 clicks. And now we can select this entire lockup, click on the Align tab, center it vertically, and then press Command-G to group it together. So we now have another nice lockup here. So as you can see, we're just building out a couple of assets that we can use in our storefront mockup. And what's really nice is that we can have all of these elements contained on a single artboard. Now, if you were to have other variations of this or other storefronts, you could go ahead and add other artboards into the same Illustrator file, which is a really nice feature. Now, I'm going to grab my type tool again, click, and this time I'm going to type out the number 23. I'm going to select the type, come back over here to my character panel, and this time I want to make sure that I have 1893 black, which I do. I'm going to make the type size about 20.85, and you can leave the tracking set to -25. Now I'm going to zoom in a bit here, just so you guys can see, and I'm going to press M on the keyboard so that I can now use my rectangle tool. I'm going to click and hold the Shift key to make a perfect square, make sure it's solid black, and then move your cursor over any of the 4 corners, hold the Shift key, and just rotate that about 45 degrees. Now I want to make sure that this is about centered here so that it fits nicely into this little nook here on the 23. I'm going to move it over while holding the Shift key. Now click, hold Alt, Option, and Shift, and move a copy to the opposite side. Alright, so you should now have something like this. Click and drag around the whole lockup and press Command-G, or you can come up to the Object menu and choose Group. Now once it's grouped, that option will be grayed out, and you can only ungroup it. Okay, so let's go ahead and maybe hold the Alt, Option key and Shift and click and drag another copy to the opposite side. Right, so now what I want to do is open up the last ornament that we're going to be using here, which is the divider. And I'm going to grab Divider CC, select it, copy it, close it, come back over here and paste it. And now I'll use my type tool once again, to type out the word boulangerie or bakery. I'm sorry if I'm not saying that in the most beautiful or eloquent way. But what we're going to do here is make sure that we have the same font as we did in our previous step. And we're just going to change the size a little bit. So what I want to do here, a quicker and easier way to do this, is to select the type, press I to get your eyedropper tool, and now just click on any of the 3 lines from this lockup here on the bottom. And now we'll have the exact same type with the exact same properties. Now click and drag around the divider and the text. Click and hold the Alt Option key while holding Shift and drag down to make another copy of it. And then let's just go ahead and do this again with both copies here. Alright, so you should now have 4 lines of text, 4 dividers, and I'm just going to copy the divider to place 1 all the way on the bottom. Now, what we're going to do here is change out some of the words. So I'm going to make the second word here, pâtisserie, make this third word here, viennoiserie, which essentially is another type of pastry, but it's more of a dessert pastry if I'm understanding that correctly. And then we'll make our last word down here, traiteur, which is catering. So essentially we're just listing out a few of the products and services that we have at the big pastry shop. Now once you're done here, click and drag around all 4 of these and come up to the Align panel and choose Horizontal Align Center. And now we have everything nice and aligned. And you can also do that again with the number above. So just make sure that's all nice and centered. Now what we're going to do is select this whole lockup here, click, hold Alt, Option, and Shift, and move it to the other side. Okay, and I'm going to grab that with the number and make sure that that's centered as well, and then just tap it in a little bit. Okay, and I can also move these over just to give myself a little bit of space. Now this time we're actually only going to have 2 blocks of text in here. So I'm going to get rid of a few of those dividers, and I'm now going to change this to say pâtisseries, artisanale, servi quotidiennement, which is a very long word for daily. So we're saying artisanal pastries served daily. Now for our bottom text here, we just want to add a few other lines of text. So I'm just going to come in here with my type tool and we'll type out gâteau pour occasion spéciale. Just saying cakes for special occasions. Now what we want to do is lock this layer, so I'm going to select it, press Command-Control-2 so that I can grab the divider behind it and just move that down a bit. Now I'll come up to Object, Unlock All, and I need to select this first group of text that we just made and lock that by pressing Command-Control-2 again. Select that top divider, the text, and the bottom divider, and just move them down. Okay, so tap it down a few more times just to give it a little bit of breathing room. And there you go. So make sure you come up here, unlock everything, select this whole group, align it centered, horizontal align center, and then you can press Command-Control-G to group it. Do the same thing for this text on the right side, and then be sure to save this artwork so that we can now jump over into Photoshop and begin customizing our storefront mockup. Now over here in Photoshop, I've opened up the Paris Amsterdam 2 PSD from the 30 Signs Facades Paris Amsterdam mockup made by Vadim in the Design Cuts Marketplace. And the first thing you'll notice is that everything is white. So to get rid of that, we're just going to trash this top layer here that says Remove Me. And now you can see our beautiful storefront. So the first thing we want to do is come in here and check out each of these smart objects. And you guys can see that these are all kind of opportunities for us to customize. So let's go ahead and start with the top one, this advertisement. And if I open that up, I can now drop something else in here. So I'm going to go to the freebies folder for this tutorial, and I'm going to select the free stock image from Pixabay, and you guys will find a link for that in the written portion of the design tutorial. I'm going to click, hold the Shift key, and drag this over here into my smart object, press Command-Control-T to do a free transform, and then Command-0 to fit it to my window so that I can see the entire bounding box. Now I'm going to click, hold the Alt, Option, and Shift keys, and drag it down until it fits nicely in my window, and then press Return. Now, all I'm going to do is add a hue saturation adjustment layer by clicking on the adjustment layer icon down here, choose hue saturation, and just move the saturation slider to the left until it's set to about -38. okay, just to tone down the colors a bit. Now add a new layer on top and press G on the keyboard to get your gradient tool, and make sure that you have a solid black foreground color. So if you don't, press D on the keyboard to reset your swatches, and you can use the X key to toggle between the foreground and background until black is the foreground color. And we also just want to make sure that we now have a black to transparent gradient, which we do. You guys will see that over here in the gradient editor, and it should be a linear gradient as well. Now on my new layer, all I'm going to do is click somewhere here above the image and click and drag down to create a nice shadow from the top. Press Command J to duplicate it, Command Control plus T to do a free transform, and then click on the shape here while holding the Control key and choose Flip Vertical. Click and hold Shift to move it down to the bottom, and now we have a mirror image of that shadow. Press Command Control and J again to duplicate the layer, Command Control T to do a free transform. This time hold Control, click on the layer, and choose Rotate 90 degrees clockwise. Now we can move this over here to the left side, and we'll just need to extend it all the way up using that bounding box. Now, as you may have guessed, we're going to duplicate that again, Command Control J, Command Control T, click on it, and this time choose Flip Horizontal. Now I can move this over to the right side, and you should now have a nice faded shadow from all four sides. Alright, so go ahead and press Command S to save it, Command W to close the window, and you can now see that we have inserted our image here into that space. And it looks a little bit more believable because we added that shadow, so it looks like it's actually inside of a case. Now the next thing we're going to do is turn off this Shade N1 Smart Object because I don't want to have any text on this shade up top. What I do want to do, however, is change the color of that shade or that tapestry up here. So all we're going to do is zoom in really close, get our pen tool by pressing P on the keyboard, and I'm just going to come in here and begin to trace this shape. Now, it's not a very complex shape, but just take your time, take a couple of seconds here to trace this and use the lines to guide you. It doesn't have to be exact, but we just want to get a nice selection around this area. So I'm going to continue to follow the shape, come down here, okay, until we can go all the way around. And again, just let this guide you and inform where your next point should be. All right, so we'll bring it all the way around, close the shape, and then press Command, Control, and Return on the keyboard in order to activate our selection. Now that we've done that, I'm going to come in here, select the shade, and I'm going to now add a hue saturation adjustment layer again. This time I'll check off the colorize box, set the hue to about 6, the saturation to 24, and let's go ahead and change the lightness to -43. So that will just give us a nice dark, slightly desaturated red color. Now if you need to come in here and modify this selection at all, well, it's pretty easy to do that. All we're going to do is trace over the area that we want to fill with our red color. Okay, using the pen tool again. Come up here, just continue to follow that shape. Close it, press Command, Control, and Return on the keyboard. Press X so that your foreground color is white. And now, as long as you have that mask selected, you can just press Alt, Option, and Delete, and that's going to fill that area with your foreground color. Okay, so that looks a bit better. Now, come down here to the photo all the way at the bottom, add a curves adjustment layer, and this time I'm just going to add a single point here in the grid and move it down and to the right, and you can manually input the values here. I'm going to set an input setting of 162 and an output of 92. Come over here to my layers, and then I'm just going to drop the opacity down to about 50%, so it's not quite as intense, but it still gives us a nice bit of contrast here. All right, and that's looking pretty good. Now I'm just going to get rid of that shade smart object layer for now, and go ahead and make sure that you save this file as a separate file from the original mockup template so you don't overwrite it. All right, guys, now come just above the curves layer, and you'll see that we have Facade N1, and that is our main bit of signage up here on the top. So double-click to come inside, and now we're going to jump over to Illustrator, grab our first line of text here, copy it, come back into Photoshop, press Command V to paste it as a smart object, and then hold Alt, Option, and Shift to scale it up, make it nice and big, then press Return to apply the changes. Now I'll turn off the visibility for that first layer, double-click on my smart object text here, and apply a color overlay. Now for the hex color here, I'm going to enter a light gray, entering the hex value F2, 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 and then click OK twice to change it, and then press Command Control S to save the changes. And now you can see how it's updated in the mockup behind this smart object window. And if I want to move this around a bit, I can do so. I want to move it over to the right, maybe down a bit. And then each time you save it, you'll see it update in the mockup. Okay, and this is also why I wanted to move some of these letters closer together in the very beginning so that we can make it as large as possible here in the mockup. All right, so just a little bit more. And you just have to play with it for a few minutes to get it looking right. Make it look good. And there we go. Now I can close out of that and we can move on. Now I want to double click on the Facade N3 Smart Object, which is going to be this first text layer here under this shade. Double click on the layer, come back over to Illustrator, and now select the Maison Fondue in 1925 text. Copy it, come back over to Photoshop, paste it as a smart object, make it larger by dragging out while holding Alt, Option, and Shift, press Return, turn off the visibility of that first layer, and double click on this to apply a color overlay. Now for this, we're going to use a different color value here. I'm going to enter C2B583, which is this nice gold color. And let's just move it down a bit. Press Command Control S to save it. And you can just move this tab down to the side here so it's out of the way, so you can see how this is looking in your mockup. All right, maybe just move it down a little bit more. And I can actually make it a little bit smaller. That looks pretty good. And now once you're happy with it, you can just close out of that window. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to the next area here, Facade N2. Double click the Smart Object, come over to Illustrator, and now we can grab this nice sunburst lockup that we created, copy it, come back over and paste it as a smart object, and make it a little bit larger here, and then press Return. Now turn off the original text layer below, double click the layer, and apply a color overlay using that same gold color. Now what I want to do here is copy this layer style so that I don't have to go in and change it every time. So all I have to do is hold the Control key, click on the FX icon, and choose Copy Layer Style. Now press Command Control S to save it, Command Control W to close the window, and now you can see our lockup here just above our ad. Now what we want to do next is come to our middle window, which is window N2, double click on that, come back into Illustrator, and we're going to select this nice lockup here from the bottom on the center. Come back over to Photoshop, paste it as a smart object, make it a little bit larger, and now all I have to do is turn off that layer below, hold Control, click on the Smart Object layer, and choose Paste Layer Style to apply that same gold color. Now don't worry about this bottom layer here. This is just adding a bit of shadow on the window to help the text stand out. So I'm just going to save that, move the tab to the side, and you can now see our text has been placed in that center window. Now if I want to modify the placement of it again, I'll just come into this Smart Object layer, maybe move it up a bit, and then save it, and you can see it updating in real time. All right, so maybe down actually would be better. Somewhere about there looks good, and then I'm going to close out of that tab. Now we just have these left and right windows, so I'll come into window N1, double click, come back into Illustrator again, and I'm going to select this body of text here, this whole lockup on the left. Copy it, come back in, paste it, make it a bit larger, press Return, and again, turn off that original layer below. And this time I'm going to paste the layer style. And now what I want to do is duplicate it by pressing Command J, double click on it once again, and this time change the color overlay for this top copy to solid white. Press M on the keyboard to get your rectangular marquee tool, and now I'm going to click and drag around the text. Hold the Shift key and select this text on the bottom here to add to the selection. And now at the bottom of the layers palette, just click on this object here that says Add Layer Mask. And what that's going to do is make it so our text is in white and everything else is in gold. Now press Command S to update it and save it. And you can see how that's looking in the mockup here. Now I can select both of those layers and maybe just tap them down a few times. And that's looking pretty good. Now let's go into our window N3 layer. I'm just going to move this to the side here. And I'm going to keep my other window open for the moment, just so that I can try and line these up, because I want the number 23 to kind of line up on both windows. So let's go to Illustrator, select our block of text here on the right side and copy it, come back into Photoshop, paste it as a smart object. Oop, but we pasted it in the wrong one. Paste it over here. Okay, and now I'm just going to scale it up a bit like I did before. turn off that original layer below, paste the layer style so we have gold. Okay, and now I'm going to duplicate it, double click, and change the color overlay to white. And we're going to do the same thing that we did before. Okay, and now what we're going to do is press M on the keyboard once again, click and drag around each of these text boxes here while holding the Shift key to add to our previous selection, and then click on the Add Layer Mask icon with that top layer selected to reveal the gold. Now, in order to try and line these up, I'm going to select my gold smart object from this left window here, click, hold the Shift key, and drop it in my document. And I'll grab both of these other layers here, and I'm just going to scale it down a bit so that I can make it the same size and move it up. Okay, now I can get rid of that first layer there, press Command-Control-S to save it, and you can now see that it's on our second window, or our third window rather. But this isn't exactly lining up as I had hoped, so what I'm going to do is just drag down a guide here using my rulers. Okay, and if you guys don't have your rulers up here and on the left side, you can get them just by coming to View, Rulers. And now what we're going to do is come back into that tab, into that smart object, and move it down and save it so that we can see each time that we make an adjustment. All right, until we get it lined up like that. Good. Now save it, close out, and we now have our beautiful Le Grand Patisserie storefront. Now, I was feeling, really inspired to do something like this. I just came back from a trip to Paris, which was like walking into a painting. It was just a beautiful and inspirational place, and I thought that doing something like this would be a great way to use some of these awesome typefaces from the Professional Dynamic Font Library. Now, there's still time to check out this bundle, guys. There's a lot of great typefaces in here and bonus stuff, whether it's a nice sans serif font, display fonts, brush fonts, script fonts. It's a really awesome library that's going to help you guys step up your game. And this is a great way to use some of these fonts as well. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed this tutorial and hopefully learned a few new tips and tricks along the way. As always, we would love to see what kind of stuff you guys do with this on your own, in your own projects and everything like that. So thank you guys so much for watching. Once again, this is Eric Vasquez here with Design Cuts, and we'll see you next time.